What's going on, JD? What's going on, PW? What's going on? What's going on? Who swung calls? I think everybody swung calls. To the moon, my guy. Yo, the funny part is that Gaston has been bearish. I don't know how many days already. And now he's just talking about the moon. And he says for the next 2 weeks. That's really interesting. What's going on, Sids? Is Tesla on the menu? Did I have Tesla on the menu? Actually, no, I had it on the menu yesterday. I mean, at this point, it's kind of off the menu. It's kind of very news based. And so tomorrow is gonna be more so whether I think it's gonna be a little bit more of a sell-off. I didn't see the hype out of the investor day today, and so I'm not expecting much out of it tomorrow. Could we see a little bit of a gap up if market's gonna pump? I don't really expect it because we actually had the gap up this morning and we only pumped like $6 on Tesla today. So I'm not really expecting too much. I mean, given the fact that we pumped today and it was only up $6 this morning on that gap up, I mean, I'm not necessarily bearish on Tesla, but I'm not expecting some kind of drastic movement that it's really going to pump. As we saw today, it literally pumped and it gave back most of those gains at the end of the day here today. So we'll see how it consolidates, how investors, how analysts actually react to the investor day today. I'm expecting a moderate. I'll take a look at the chart after, but I didn't have it on my list today. Try to rotate, see the names that I'm really more interested in, but I'll take a look at it towards the end. Other than that, though, hopefully you guys had a pretty green day today. I know there was kind of a mixed bag whether we were going to see a continuation this morning. That was a massive gap up that we had overnight, and that was pretty massive when I say that, because by 10 o'clock in the morning, a lot of names were already up so much that there wasn't that many moves left intraday for that matter. It was pretty much more scalps that you had. I had a few names that actually pushed. I know that Square was one of them. That was a beautiful move that we actually saw for that. Amazon has some nice continuation. So did Google. So quite a few names other than the ones that I'm really just speaking out loud about right now. But generally, mega cap tech actually had a beautiful day across the board for the most part, other than Facebook and Netflix. And so those are the only two I think were the laggers here today. Microsoft had a modest type gain, and so did Apple. So those two actually were pretty much just modest, and then Facebook and Netflix were the laggers of today. I mean, given the fact that Netflix actually ran so much already before this big pump, it was expected that you're gonna have some kind of pullback after the move that Netflix did. And then Facebook, we all know the news that's surrounding Facebook right now. There's just too much social media, it's too many news going around, and it's pretty much all bearish sentiments. So whenever it gets into oversold territory, which it will likely hit some type of oversold territory by tomorrow, then we'll see some kind of likely pop going into at least next week. All right. So that's just the sentiment wise as far as those two. Other than that, there was also news as well this evening. I believe SIG actually broke the news tonight. They actually had the voting for the debt ceiling to be raised. And so, if I'm not mistaken, the voting was 50 to 48. And so it is in favor of being passed. And so now it goes to the House for the final approval. And then that will actually pump up the market again. As we saw, that was the news that pumped us up today, sentiment wise. Okay. So those are things that you want to keep in mind. Tomorrow, we actually do have the non-farm payrolls that are going to be out tomorrow. That should be roughly around 8:30 tomorrow morning. And so we'll see what the sentiment is regarding when those numbers come out. Keep in mind with the numbers that are going to come out tomorrow, we're actually going to find out whether, is going to be news about tapering. There's probably going to be some type of sentiment, some type of news base. Someone's going to report something as far as if we do have better than expected non-farm payrolls tomorrow, it's going to likely be some kind of rumor about tapering being moved up. And so that may not be too good for the markets, despite the fact that we have the debt ceiling being raised. However, I do think that the debt ceiling being raised is a little bit more of an impact right now, immediately. And so that will keep us neutral to the worst case scenario tomorrow. Maybe we're slightly red if we do have a blowout number on non-farm payrolls tomorrow. And that'll trigger some kind of rumors, news as far as tapering being escalated to earlier in the year. But then the debt ceiling is actually going to keep us neutral because that's bullish for the markets. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind for tomorrow. And so if you did some calls, let's just hope that it's just a modest beat on the data tomorrow, and that will keep us really bullish as far as we're mooning tomorrow. But if we do have really good job, we blow out those numbers tomorrow, then we could see a little bit of red tomorrow, in which the tapering is going to be a little bit more of a fear factor. Okay, so that's something just to keep in mind tomorrow. But as you saw today, we had that beautiful breakout that we had yesterday, and this is on the 1 hour. And so then we ended up making that breakout, and we got the follow through. If you heard me mention last night, is I wanted to see the follow through on that breakout that we had yesterday. And so we had that beautiful breakout. We had a little bit of a retracement going into the close, which was expected. We could see a little bit more of that retracement tomorrow based upon the news tomorrow, in my opinion. That's going to be the deciding factor. But overall, we are going to be bullish. We should continue to be bullish into next week as well. And so we'll see a nice little continuation. We'll complete this gap. If not tomorrow, at least going into next week, we should continue to fill this gap right into that 434.95 mark. And then as we continue to progress upward, then we do also have this gap fill above, which is entering at above 445.37. And we'll see that gap fill. So we're going to see that end up getting there. Overall, I could see us pushing 447, 448 into next week with the bullish sentiment, unless something actually changes and for whatever reason that data tomorrow really brings some kind of fear factor into the market. Okay, so that would be sentiment wise. I mean, if that brings in fear to the market, then that would be pretty bad. But I am bullish going into next week as well. I don't think that the data tomorrow is really going to be some kind of factor, and that's going to push aside the news of the debt ceiling. The other one that I had was QQQ. Let's see the update that I actually had here. I had my resistance lines again. We had that flash of that breakout yesterday, and so we got that beautiful continuation. Now we actually created a beautiful little gap down below here. So we'll see if we get a further retracement going down to the gap. I have two pivots that I'll be watching, 360.158 and then 360.28 for the Qs if we get a further retracement. Other than that, I expect to get a nice reversal here going upward, and then we'll get into this beautiful gap in which the Qs are going to continue to run as we saw today. And that gap will enter right into above 366.36. And that'll be a beautiful move tomorrow, so we'll see some nice continuation if we do get that beautiful reversal. Other than that, then we'll see those pivots that are likely going to anchor us until next week. Okay. A few names that I wanted to just mention that I did mention this one yesterday as we saw that flash or that breakout, that little candle right there. We saw that flash. We made a nice breakout. It's likely that we get some kind of retracement because that's typically what happens when you break out of a falling wedge. You typically get some kind of retracement. Now, given the fact that this is close enough to 140, that would have to be some kind of drastic effect tomorrow in which some kind of fear would likely have to come in to get that steep of a pullback. It's possible that we end up just filling the gap, in which that gap would end up finishing at 142.15, and then we get the reversal as well. So that's something to also keep in mind. But those two factors is either filling the gap, which will be a modest pullback for Apple tomorrow, or we get some kind of fear following the results of tomorrow's data, and then we end up retracing down close enough to that mid 140 mark. Okay, so I'll keep my eyes on this one tomorrow. I would love to actually get a retest to go long on this one. That's what be my perfect scenario right now, is to get that retest and then be able to go long on this one. And then we do have this beautiful gap above 145.96, in which that will be a beautiful play from the retest up to that 145 mark. Okay, so that's something I'll keep an eye on tomorrow. I did have AFRM. I actually showed this one yesterday, and I kind of gave everyone the advice of not being too quick to short it. As we saw, we got right back up to the resistance level, and then we started to fade. If you did end up shorting it right around that 139.5 mark, then you got a nice little $7 drop there, right down to about 132.63, in which it looks a little bit like a double bottom here on the 1 hour. So we could continue to push back up. As you saw here, when you last touched the resistance line, you got a drop off. You got a nice little push back up, in which that could be the same scenario here, and then we sold off. So keep that in mind. If you do get the bounce back up, then that may be a nice scenario in which you do short. But again, if you're going to short it back up here, remember to keep a stop loss, because if you're going to retest that resistance, it is a possibility that it ends up breaking that resistance. So I would try to be careful in shorting this again, but that would be the scenario that I would look to short it up near the resistance, but keep a tight stop loss at that point in time. Okay, just wanted to point that one out. The other one to point out, similar scenario to Apple on the breakout of the down pattern that we had. We ended up getting a nice follow through on that breakout of the descending channel. We got a little bit of a retracement going into the close today. So we have a little bit of a tiny gap here right around that high 293 mark. And then so we'll see if we end up filling that gap and getting the reversal to fill the gap upward, or if we end up getting the retracement, same scenario as Apple. And so those two will literally follow each other more than likely to that extent. And we'll see what type of retracement we end up getting. So if you see it get a reversal at that gap fill, that'll be the point to go long. If we end up getting below this gap fill and retesting here, then that'll be the point to go long, right around that mark of 291 and a half. Okay, and I actually do like Microsoft here a lot. Microsoft and Apple are probably two of my favorites here for tech, along with Amazon as well. But those two look really beautiful on textbook breakouts of the patterns that they actually developed for those downtrends. I'm not certain why I actually had Adobe here. That's very interesting. Actually, I do see, because it actually had a break of the downtrend. Now, the only thing with Adobe is that with Adobe, you actually I have to check the liquidity, but this was a beautiful break of the downtrend, and the fact that you had so many gap fills, that was the one point that actually stood out to me with all the gap fills that you actually have highlighted here. And so I will take a dip at this one tomorrow if it presents itself. We get a nice little continuation. I will look to get into Adobe here if we get a nice reversal. As we saw, this pretty much sunk a lot from where it was prior. And so that's just one that I'm keeping an eye watch on. And that one's just, I'm not sure why I actually had it on the watch list, but it's one that I actually have on my personal watch list. And so as you see, it's highlighted, it broke that downtrend. We'll see if we get the gap fill down or if we get a nice continuation into the gap fill above. Okay. Let me actually see another one that I had. I had CrowdStrike. This was a nice little falling wedge that we had. We got the flash of that breakout. We got a nice little retest, and so I'll be looking for a continuation on this one as well. I can see this one getting right into target zone right here of that 261 level. And so that'll be a nice, close enough to about a 10 to 11 point move right up if we get a nice little continuation off of this retest. So that's another one that I'll keep on my radar tomorrow. This was actually one that's been on the radar for me and Tom for quite a while. We've been watching Zillow for quite some time. It's finally looking like it's breaking out of the resistance. That's the key what you wanted to watch. And so we got the next candle here that's pushing us up. I want to see if we get that retest or not. That'll be key. If we do get a retest or not. But if we end up breaking above this level, above that 96 level, then it's likely that we won't get that retest. It's likely it's going to continue to just shoot straight up. And that's kind of like how we saw with like names like Coin for that matter. We never got a retest on names like Coin. If you saw when Coin actually broke its downtrend, we didn't get any kind of retest there. It just went straight up. And that's why I just wanted to show you the similarity there. When we broke that downtrend, it went straight up. We didn't have a retest for that matter. So I just wanted to point that out. Another name that's actually on my watch list is also Visa. And so if I go down to a lower time frame, you actually see Visa actually broke that downtrend that it had. It's actually retested on that downtrend. And so I'm expecting continuation off of this one as well. We had a nice little double bottom that we had around that 221 and a quarter level. And so as we see that little continuation here on that off of that double bottom, I'll look to see how it's going to react to this support level that's at right now, and if we get a push continuing back up. Now, the level that I do want to see is right around this mark of that 233, close enough to 234 mark, and that'll be about a $4 move in which it'll make, and that'll be my first price target that I'll be watching for Visa here. So that I'll be watching that one. The other one which likely is going to move with it, is also Mastercard. Mastercard had a similar double bottom right here at the bottom, and we have a similar setup, almost identical. And so it also has a double bottom. It's getting a nice little retracement, and we'll see if this one actually gets down to the gap fill that it has right here at the high 348 level. And so that Mastercard and Visa, they pretty much move together. So we'll see how that one reacts if we end up pretty much at support here, or we end up getting a gap fill on Mastercard here, which is a little bit more of a steeper drop. So that's why I do like Visa a lot more than I do like Mastercard at this point. This is one that I just wanted to throw in here. This is a bonus that I don't think anyone pretty much looks at, but I wanted to point out this one. This is NLS. This was just a beautiful downtrend. It's a very cheap stock, and it actually finally broke out of a falling wedge. And so I wanted to point this one out. If you're looking for a very cheap play, if you're looking for shares, this is one of those plays that you want to keep an eye on tomorrow. It actually made a nice little breakout. Target price targets are 1046, 1140, and then 1382 that I'll be watching. So this is a very cheap one. I bought some shares on this one to hold. So we'll see how it reacts. I didn't go in with options, but it was just a cheap play to hold some nice shares on and collect some nice premium, as it should get a nice reversal off of this breakout. So keep that one on watch. Another one I just wanted to throw out there was Chewy. This one's regressed a lot from where its highs were. This was once a $100 stock almost. As you see, it hit a high of 97.74 and it's regressed so much. But it does have a very big gap fill, as growth stocks are not doing so well right now. But I did like the fact that it actually broke out of a falling wedge. I'll see if we get a little bit of a consolidation here going sideways, or if we start a reversal here. So that's why I just wanted to keep it on my radar and bring it to alert to everyone. So I want to see how this actually reacts after breaking out of the falling wedge. We'll see if we get that sideways consolidation before we get that full reversal. Okay, so that's one. Just keep a watch on that one. Another one that this one's very pattern based is Activision. I'll be watching this one. This is actually a really nice inverted head and shoulders on Activision Blizzard. So we'll see if we end up getting the break over that neckline. That will likely cross right around the level of 78.40. And so we'll see if we get a nice break on that neckline and then we get some nice uptrend here. This one's been a lot of news based as well. They had some internal issues with the company. And so we'll see if we finally get a reversal after all the bad news that it's had. And that's just another one on my radar. As far as banks, I don't know if everyone's aware, we actually do have bank earnings coming up. This is one that's on my radar as well. JPM is also on my radar, but this one actually stood out because it's a little more pattern based on Citigroup. And so this one also has a nice little inverted head and shoulders action. And so we'll see if this ends up getting a nice little breakout right over that 73 and 73.35 level. We'll see if we get a nice little breakout over there. And then we could see a nice little run up into the earnings next week. So I have this bank on my watch list, and then on my other watch list, I have JPM as well. Another name that I actually heard rumors on this one today. Someone did mention it. I don't know if it was Dapper or maybe Sig is watching this one. But Hut actually had some nice call flow that came in today. When I actually looked at the chart, I couldn't help but actually bring this one to everyone's attention because it had a beautiful little cup and handle here. And so I'll be looking for the support level, in which my support dropped a little bit. But I'll be looking for support right around that 883 level as we get that regression on the handle. And so I'll see if I end up adding shares on this one once it gets down to that level. This will be another play like the NLS play. A very cheap play with pretty much a lot of upside. And so I'll add some shares on this one. And this is one you'll keep on the radar. Again, I'm looking for support right around the level of 934 is the level that I'm looking for support on this handle. So about another few cent drop. And then we should find that support to get a nice reversal and break out of the cup and handle. So HUT and NLS are pretty much those two cheap stocks that I'm watching as far as shares and for a nice growth on that. Okay. So that was pretty much the watch list that I had as far as today. Tesla, I know that someone actually mentioned Tesla, so I'll take a quick peep at it for you guys. As you saw, we had a nice little push, and then we regressed half of that candle that we had. We hit a high of 805. I believe Dougie actually had a target of 803 and change, if I'm not mistaken. And so we actually passed his price target. I was expecting to hit 800, and then we got that second follow through on the spike today. But as you saw, the biggest thing was that we regressed quite a bit off of that spike that we had today. And so we could end up continuing to chop here. I just didn't like the fact that we didn't get as much of a push as I expected. I, I expected a better gap up today. That didn't happen. The news reaction to the investor day, it was very modest. So I'm not expecting too much. It's always on my radar for that matter, but it didn't get the move that I was really expecting. And so we'll see what we do here. If we end up filling this gap, then that's likely going to be a directional move here. As you see under this, we have a nice little gap fill here right under that marker of 783.38. There's a nice little gap fill down there. So if we do have a red market tomorrow for whatever reason and we get down to that gap fill, if we break below the gap fill, then of course, then bears likely will have some type of control here. But I do want to see this get closer back to that 805 level. And then we can see this end up getting close enough to this resistance, in which 820 was my overall target on this channel. So that's pretty much the directional move that I'm looking at. If we end up getting below that 783.38 and we fill that gap, it's likely a chance that we end up breaking below the gap and bears have control. If we end up getting close enough back to over 805, then 820 is a target on the top of this channel that I'm targeting. Okay, so those are the two scenarios that I'm looking at for Tesla. Let me see a quick 3 or 4 names that you guys are calling out, and then I'll take a look. Let me see. I heard Roblox. I haven't looked at Roblox. I know it had a really fat head and shoulders. And so what I actually had was a nice little expanding wedge here. As you saw, you broke down, you retested, and you ended up making a newer low. And so to me, it hasn't broken the downtrend yet. And so that's what I will be looking to see if this ends up breaking the downtrend. Because in my opinion, you have not broken that downtrend yet. And that's what I'll be watching. But to me, until this actually gets back over that resistance level, I don't see this breaking that downtrend on my wedge that I have. That'll be the actual resistance that I see that's actually holding this down. But we have a nice little channel down that's in progress here. So I don't see anything that's really eye popping here because we can easily reject here tomorrow and then make another leg down on Roblox. So nothing there that I'm too much interested in, but we also do have a little gap fill here. If you're already in it and you're looking for some kind of upside, the gap fill here is really what's highlighted. As you see, we've pretty much rejected that gap fill on the resistance of this downtrend here. And so we're likely going to make another leg, or we could end up gapping down and then retesting the resistance, in which that'll likely push us out of this little channel that we have going on Roblox. So the gap fill is pretty much what I would eye short term. That gap fill enters around 76.24 above that, and we can enter that gap fill. So that would be pretty much the highlight of Roblox that I would say is that gap fill. The other name that I saw someone mention Disney here. Okay, so I saw Disney twice. So as we saw with Disney is that we actually had a nice little double bottom here. And I'll zoom out to show you the pattern. But we had a nice little double bottom right around that 170 mark. If I pull out the chart, we have a nice little, what I would say is a little bit of a descending triangle for that matter. And so I want to see if we're going to get to this gap fill up here. That's really what I'm more interested in, is the gap fill up here. And that would end up breaking, that would likely lead to us breaking the resistance of this channel, of this triangle. And so we'll enter that gap fill above 82.23. Then we'll enter that gap fill and then we'll likely test the resistance of this triangle for that breakout. But if we end up continuing to regress, as you see, we actually gapped up. And so you do have a beautiful little gap right below that 177.33 mark. And then you had a prior gap that was below 171.97. And so if we end up filling that gap down, I want to see if we continue to break below that gap. And that'll likely be a bearish signal for Disney. But if we end up breaking above today's high, then we'll likely see this gap tested and then the resistance of the triangle tested for that further upside. Okay, but that's pretty much the two scenarios that I'm looking at to get a nice little breakout here. And so if I'm targeting here, my overall target here is around 187 on Disney if we get the breakout that I'm looking for. And so we'll likely see that 187 level, some type of retest, and then a follow through. Okay. You bought a Disney call when it first flushed, then took Disney like 6 points for my contract to move. Um, Disney be like that sometime. I'm not gonna lie. Disney's a little bit tough right now. The only thing sentiment wise also I think is really holding Disney back is that the last time they actually reported any type of news, it was that the subscriber growth was not healthy as they expected. And so that's what's actually holding Disney back. And I think until we actually get the next earnings and we hear what their subscriber growth is looking like now at this point, post COVID, then we'll see exactly what Disney's gonna break out of because it's been going sideways for quite some time. As we peaked since that $200 mark, around that 203 mark, we've just been sideways. To me, this is just a lot of consolidation, or pretty much similar to what we've seen with Amazon almost. We've just been in a chop zone, a very wide chop zone. And until those subscriber numbers go up, we hear some kind of good news about that. I don't really expect a drastic move out of Disney for that matter, sentiment wise. All right. Let's see. I'll take one more. I mean, Baba's already made a move. I mean, I don't really know what to really look at for Baba, but Baba's practically already made a move. Again, you made a fat gap below. If I'm looking for a nice little support level, in which if that's what you're trying to indicate, my level of support would be right around this level of 152, in which we could retrace a bit of this move that we had today. That was almost a 12-point move. So right around that one low 152 level would be where support is. But then you're eyeing either the gap that we created today, or you're eyeing the gap that's above, in which you're going to enter that next gap right above 163.07. So it's pretty much black and white more or less with Baba right now. The good sign is that you have some nice momentum building with Baba now at this point off a 11-point move. Let's see if we can build that momentum for that matter. Can it continue from this point? Or do we go right back into dump China mode in which we end up filling this really fat gap that we just created today? All right. One more I'll do, and I heard someone actually mention well, Facebook reversal. Facebook reversal is not coming just soon. We're gonna likely get into oversold territory, possibly tomorrow, and so we should see at least a pop. If not tomorrow, then likely on Monday, as we pretty much sold off today, despite the overall gap up in tech. All right. The one more which I see someone pointing out Mara. I haven't looked at Mara at all actually. That's very interesting. So let's see what Mara actually looks like. Let me see if I dial in a little bit more. So you have a nice little wedge that's actually in formation here. I would say you actually have a nice little support level here. That's a very good sign. So you have a nice little support level here right around that mark of 37.29. That would be a nice little support level. If I were to see this breaking out, then I want to see this get over this level right around here, in which we can end up testing that recent high that we just had. And so right around that level of 38.79, in which we could easily gap up above that. But that will be the point of where you see this end up getting a nice continuation. And so the overall level that I want to see this end up breaking out of was right around this level that I had. So right around this level is where I wanted to see it break out of to get a nice little follow through. And so that level is right around the 40.29. And so we'll see if we get that move, in which we're going to get a nice little curling bottom here on Mara as Bitcoin continues to move. And again, if I'm not mistaken, the price target on Bitcoin from straight was like 58,000. And so if 58,000 is still in the works, then we can definitely get over this level of that 40 mark, and then we can continue to make that nice little cup that is in the formation of. All right. So that's what I'm looking at for Mara, but it's so based on Bitcoin that you actually do have to look at how Bitcoin is moving and what its progression is right now. If I actually look at Bitcoin, let's see if I take a look real quick on just a few names that I have for crypto. So crypto is actually up. Bitcoin's actually up about 500 points. So it looks like we're making a nice little wedge here to break out of. As we've seen, it's pretty much just been a staircase up and up and up. And so we'll likely get close enough to the high 54,000 mark by morning, more than likely if this ends up breaking up on this wedge. And Straight would really be the person to really look to in the chat because he tracks this left and right. You can literally message him at probably 2 o'clock in the morning and he'll have an answer for you because he stays awake charting this all night. All right. But that kind of wraps up the session tonight, guys. But other than that, let's see what market data does tomorrow. We'll see if we get a blowout number, which I think is going to get taper rumors escalating. And so that would escalate, that would pretty much push up the tapering more than likely to be sooner rather than later. But given the fact that we have the debt ceiling news that's very bullish for the markets, that should override any type of bad news. And other than that, Carolu, thank you, Air Brakes. I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But let's see if we close out the week strong, guys. Hopefully, you guys are actually in calls because I am expecting a bullish day tomorrow. I mean, even if we get some kind of retracement tomorrow morning, which will be modest, as we saw into close today, but I'm very bullish going into next week now. And so we'll see what we do tomorrow. I mean, tech is pretty much all eyes are on tech. I think the three biggest names I'm watching in tech is, again, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. Those are the three names that I'm really big on. And so we'll see what it is tomorrow, and we'll go from there. But I'll meet you guys on live tomorrow. You guys have a good night. You guys go watch some football. Go Rams. Although I like the Seahawks. I'm a big Tyler Lockett fan. And so we'll see what happens tonight. So you guys go have a good night, and